in the meantime. Okay, so before we get started, does anybody have any questions for me? Do you have any questions for me?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Is it possible to figure out on the test which ones we got wrong?
It's a tough one. I can just give you a key, so you can go in and look for yourselves. But it's not like having these in class. I mean, where I just get out my red pen and scribble all over your tests. So yeah, it's a little different. So I can just post a key for the midterm if that's what if you want, and then you can go find your own. I think if you want, that's what I can do.
Okay, I was just curious which ones they were. So
yeah, I know.
I would like that.
I know, but that would be difficult. For instance, when you're a half a point here and a half a point here and a hyphen missed there and a capitalization problem there, and it's hard to put all those in a comment box.
Gotcha.
I mean, I could do it, but it's I guess maybe I'm being a little lazy. I don't know. It's hard to type in all of those answers. So I'm going to put a key up. You guys look at it and see if you can find some of the same errors that or at least find your own errors. And that might even be a good exercise to go through.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Okay. So there's a couple things that I should say about this list. First of all, this is a list that usually represents our first field trip where we go to UCI. And there's a few things that are kind of problematic. And that is that there's a lot of scurrying around that has to go on to find this live samples for you guys. And I usually allow a certain amount of time for that. And Joe helps me as well. But today was extra challenging. And we actually there's one tree that is not going to be on your live specimen. In fact, I just went through the PowerPoint and realized that it's not on there. So on your list, if you have it with you, the number 83, which is Ceratonia siliqua, the carob tree, we're gonna use it as a placeholder. So it's going to come back, and I'm going to have to show it to you on another list because it's not in the PowerPoint and I don't have a specimen. The go-to place, there was a house on 20th Street, right down the street from where I live, and they had a male and a female right next to each other. Beautiful combination of two carob trees, because it's they're monoecious, so there's male and female. So anyway, they tore them out, and in their yard, if you look in their front yard now, instead of having these two glorious carob trees, it's just bare dirt, and then they have one spindly 3-foot tall queen palm in the middle of the yard. That's all they've got. So out with the carobs and in with the spindly queen palm. So sorry about that. I guess people don't like carob trees. One of the reasons that they can be problematic is that the male carob tree, the male flowers kind of stink, and so you can usually hear or smell them before you actually realize that that's where you are. Anyway, so this is typically a UCI list, and if you were so inclined and wanted to go to UCI, probably about 2/3 of them are in something called Aldrich Park, which is a circular park across the street from it's off of Campus Drive, and that little there's an Edwards Cinemas in there and Chick-fil-A in there. And there's a circular pedestrian bridge, is kind of a circular ramp that goes over the top of campus. If you were to just keep going straight, you'd see a lot of the trees, the carob tree, the Pinus pinea, and then in Aldrich Park, another 10 trees on our list. So if you were so inclined to try to do that. Anyway. Okay, first one, Agathis robusta from Australia. It's called the Queensland Kauri, and this is a large-scale X-current tree. It's an interesting tree. I remember when I learned the tree, the first thing that I noticed about this tree was obviously it's extremely straight, and like a few plants from South Africa and Australia, it looks otherworldly. This one looks otherworldly, and when I say that, when I show you the leaves and the cone and stuff, you'll see what I mean. But here's this tall X-current trunk, bright plastic green leaves on it. So here you can see, here's the trunk. This is the one that we have. We have a few of these in the horticulture department, and there are several on campus planted around the MBCC building. You can see that it's a gray bark. It kind of flakes a little bit, and there's this kind of a cinnamon color underneath. But these leaves, if you touch these leaves, they feel plastic, or not, maybe not plastic, but very leathery. And they look kind of strange. The stem and the leaves, same color, hard to depict where the veins are. They are parallel on the leaf, but a real interesting, strange leaf on this tree. They also have a very strange cone. It's almost perfectly round. All the seeds are these kind of fin-like seeds that radiate out from a central stem. So they're spiraling around a stem. And so these are interesting trees. And you can see that if you bring one home, and you can see the stem that goes down the middle, and here's the pocket where the stem, this part of the stem was, and you can see the seeds are spiraling around the stem. Very interesting looking seed pod as well. And here's the leathery parallel venation leaves. When you touch them, they don't really feel like your typical leaf. They can get quite tall, upwards of 100 feet, 85 typically. So not your typical residential tree unless you are inclined to get a huge tree in your yard, but they can get quite large. This is one that's behind horticulture. It's about, I'd say it's about 15 years old, and it's already about 30 feet tall. Here's one at the Huntington Library and Botanical Gardens. You get a sense that it kind of spreads out a little bit once it gets up to the top. It still maintains that strong central trunk. And here you are in Australia. This is a street tree scene. And so you can see that they've planted them as street trees here. They have real nice wide parkways though, and you would need that. The Huntington Library up by the Rose Garden and one or two other places has these trees that are pushing 100 years old. And that's one of the nice things about the Huntington Library is that a lot of the plants were collected right around 1901 to 1910. And so we've got some old trees in there. And so you can see how huge these trees can be when they reach their ultimate age, but still columnar in shape, X-current trees for sure, evergreen, dark green foliage, and a little bit of a lighter green of the new foliage. So Eastern Queensland, Australia, 80 to 150 feet tall, sensitive to drought and frost. So we'd have to be careful about that. Leathery leaves whorled around greenish stems, roundish green turning brown cones, 3 inches plus. Release seeds from a central stem, great for scale next to tall buildings. So we planted groves, little miniature groves of these next to the MBCC building in the little patio. and they're just starting to. They're probably all about, I don't know, about 8 years old, and they're still 20 feet plus. So they're starting to take off now. Okay. Araucaria heterophylla is the Norfolk Island pine. Now, when we start getting into the Araucaria genus, it's a very old genus, and you start to see kind of a blending of types within a specific species. And so this one is giving you the one look of the Araucaria heterophylla, very, very straight X-current trunk. And it's called the star pine in a way, and that has to do with the way the leaves radiate out from the central trunk there. And you can see that this one is extremely straight. But in some cases, these trees have a trunk that kind of seems like it's leaning or curving. So here you can tell why it's called a star pine. This is this kind of the radiating, very symmetrical, six-sided star. And then you can see the scale-like leaves. They kind of make little cylinders off the lateral branch here. Little new growth on the tips, but when you feel these, it's one of those things that you can end up running your hands up these thin, because they're extremely smooth and again almost plasticky, very smooth, and you kind of want to go back and test them and say, is that really what I just felt? Because they don't have a typical plant feel. Anyway, here's the bark. It's pretty rough, and one leaf with all these scale-like appendages on it. Very rough, flaky bark. Now you can see one. This is in the horticulture department, and you can see what I was talking about with this kind of deviation from the typical straight X-current trunk. When I first saw this, I started getting into the Araucaria genus and figuring out, did I misdiagnose, not misdiagnose, but misidentify these trees? But I talked with my predecessor, who actually gave lectures off of the Norfolk Islands off of Australia, and there's a lot of variation within the species. So, I said, well, what about the ones that are really straight? He goes, those are just really straight ones. And so it's something to keep in mind, that you're not always going to see the same shape to the trunk, okay? Another thing to think about with these trees, they do pretty well in low light situations. In fact, they're used and taken indoors as a house plant sometimes. Or if you happen to have one and you live in a frost-prone area, they take them in the wintertime. These are the Christmas trees in Hawaii. And the thing is that you can keep them in a pot and just bring them inside every year. And so they use these a lot in Hawaii. Not that they don't bring in some other stuff, but you see this a lot in Hawaii as Christmas trees. And then here you can see the way the leaves actually split out from the lateral branches. So native to Norfolk Island near Australia, grows moderately fast to 100 feet and 60 feet wide. Smooth, almost plastic feeling scale-like leaves, half of an inch long, curved and somewhat triangular with pointed tips. X-current growth habit can be very straight or take on a curve as though it's reaching for sunlight. Can be grown in pots, often used as Christmas trees in places like Hawaii. Okay. All right. Now we've got another pine. Now, Pinus pinea is from Southern Europe and Turkey, and it's called the Italian stone pine. And I didn't understand this until I actually started looking at pictures from Italy in Rome and some of the bigger cities, and I would see these trees all over the place from pictures. But here's the thing. Telling this from some of our other pines might be a little challenging. It's got needles that are about 3 to 4 inches long. Its needles come in, I think it's twos. I'm not sure. It'll come up in the final slide. But this shape you see right here, this is your go-to. Okay, this is one that would be most often identified by the shape. So it starts out as a straight trunk. When it gets older, it has this big broad dome, which is kind of atypical for your typical pine tree. So it's not like other pines. It has this broad dome natural shape. So look at that shape, because that's the identifying characteristic more than anything else. Okay. Now here, these are pictures that were sent to me by a friend of mine that they're actually neighbors, and they did a lot of study abroad in Italy. And the last time she was there, I said, hey, I need some pictures of Italian stone pines. And she delivered. And so here they are. But this is more what you see, in the cities and areas surrounding Rome and some of the other cities. This tall trunk, and then just a kind of a flat, broad dome at the top. So here you can see the dark green needles. You can see kind of a roundish cone, and then platy bark. So the flat plates. Now, another pine tree we had bark that was platy, and that was the Canary Island pine. I would say that if you were to tell these plates apart, if you were to just use the bark to identify, I think that the spaces in between the flat plates is darker on the Italian stone pine. But I can't guarantee that that's consistent, but it does have a platy bark. You guys all see what I mean when I say platy, right? The flat little pieces here, like here and here, and then the furrows in between. Okay, so you're going to see this in a younger stage too. And it's already taking on, in this case, this is probably a tree that's probably about 10, 15 years old. And it's already taking on that broad dome shape. But here's another thing. Look for the branches sweeping up like a dog's tail, about ready to wag. You guys see that? That might be a stretch, but it helps. When you see these around the neighborhood, this is the one pine tree that its branches kind of sweep up like a dog. Now this is a dog that has a tail, of course, but you get the idea. That was always my helpful hint as well. Here you can see it a little bit. This one's been a little bit whacked by somebody that was worried about the cable TV wires getting impinged upon. But still, you can see these upward sweeping branches here and here, dog tails. And here's some more, of the big broad dome. And, it's important for us. We had some beauties at OCC that fell didn't fall, but they got removed because of the new buildings. We've got some young ones. Hopefully they'll be big someday on campus. Okay, Southern Europe and Turkey, moderate grower, 40 to 80 feet tall and 40 to 60 feet wide. Distinctive broad dome-shaped canopy distinguishes this pine from most others. Needles in groups of 2, okay, are bright forest green to gray green and 5 to 8 inches long. So other needles in 2s, the halepensis, Pinus halepensis, the Aleppo pine has needles in 2 as well. But this one has dark green needles, okay? Younger trees recognized by upsweeping branches looking like a dog's tail. Cones 4 to 6 inches long and glossy chestnut brown. And the seeds are edible. Most pine seeds are edible, by the way, because I know this because I have a Labrador retriever that's out there going chomp, chomp, chomp in the backyard. And we're always trying to figure out what is going on. And it's some pine cone that dropped and then the seeds spewed out and she's finding them and there it is, you know? So that same Labrador retriever just had to go to the vet because she has a rose prickle right here by her eye. So those puppies, boy, they keep you hopping. Okay. Next on our list, hydranthus impetaginosus. Used to be called tababuya impetaginosa. In fact, I see quite a few nurseries still selling them as tababuya, but this is from tropical America. So, you know, anywhere from Mexico all the way down through the central parts of Central America and upper parts of South America. So this picture happens to be at Disneyland. And if you go to, these are pretty splashy trees when they bloom. It's called the pink trumpet tree. And if you go to the central circle, the hub on Main Street, USA, these are planted in kind of a semicircle and are kind of around the periphery of that hub. And if you go there around April to early June, you'll see these things showing off. One of my previous students who works at Disneyland, I texted her and said, "Can you send me some pictures from Disneyland?" And she said, "Sure enough." So she did. But anyway, this is a compound leaf, and it's palmately compound. So, you know, one petiole is right here, and then these radiating leaflets come out, each with their own petiole. So it's a compound palmate leaf, or palmately compound. They do have trumpet flowers. So I think this is Minnie's house. So the tree kind of matches the color of her house. And then you can see it's got a trumpet shaped flower, which must mean that it's in the Bignoniaceae family. They have trumpet shaped flowers. Here again, the area around the central hub of Disney. And this is when I asked her, look at the cast members are coming to work. It's early morning. The cast members are coming to work, walking through the middle there. And this is when they were doing some work on the castle. So you just had to imagine the castle here. So there it is. Okay, here's the leaf, palmately compound leaf. Evergreen to semi-evergreen, which means that if we get some cold snaps, it'll drop its leaves, but it doesn't last for long. 25 to 50 feet tall and 25 to 50 feet wide. Bears brilliant display of pink trumpet-shaped pink flowers, long, 2 to 3 inches long, in late winter to early spring. Sometimes reblooms in the fall. We're seeing this now. So there's a little bit of a fall thing going on. However, it does not bloom as a young tree. Leaf divided into 5 to 7 leaflets. Needs training for good form when it's young. Okay. Cerasus occidentalis. This is the western redbud. This is a California native known to populate most of the foothills of our Sierra Nevada mountains. Up to, I think, 4,500 feet, thereabouts. I always enjoy when we go up to our cabin, which is at 7,000 feet, seeing, depending on what month I'm going up there, seeing these bloom earlier down in the lower elevations and later as we're winding up the road in the upper elevations up to 4,500 feet. So anyway, these do bloom. They're most commonly just a big kind of arching vase-shaped shrub, multi-stemmed almost exclusively, except when they're trained in a nursery to be a standard. And then they kind of look a little gawky when they're trained as a standard, but people buy them, and we have them on campus both ways, mostly as standards. If you were to run into these bloom pretty prolifically, and they also have persistent Fabaceae pods. And so you'll see last year's pods hanging on for quite a long time. And so they're persistent. They're usually easy to find. In fact, sometimes, gardeners get asked to do really crazy things, but sometimes I was asked to remove the pods from the tree. They bothered the client. So, there you are. Takes all kinds. But here you can see the blooms. And this is just a picture of the way we would typically see it in nature. A rounded leaf. Sometimes you'll see a little notch in the tip, and sometimes I've actually seen a little bit of a protrusion in the tip. So a little inconsistent, but a roundish leaf. That's the best way to describe this one. Here you can see the leaf. These have little notches at the end here. And then you can see the persistent pods in the background hanging on there. And here's the pods and the leaves. Here's a standard. So the nursery has encouraged this tree to grow as a standard. And so you can see it's got a single trunk and it's branching up at the top. The thing that's always seems to be there, though, are those pods. So you'll always see them. Native to California foothills, 4,000 feet. I think I said 4,500. So grows 10 to 18 feet tall and wide. Typically grows as a multi-trunked large shrub to tree, occasionally trained as a single trunk tree in standard form. Leaves rounded or notched at the tips. Persistent and often abundant Fabaceae pods stay on up to a year or longer after pink lavender flowers fade. Drought tolerant, good in on water deprived slopes. So, being a California native, this would work into a California friendly landscape for sure, California native landscape for sure. Establishing, maybe Katie can talk to this, but establishing these trees is pretty important. We sometimes, when we plant trees, especially, we say, well, they're natives. They don't need to be watered much, but you have to baby anything that's been planted in its early stages, whether it be native or not. So they need water. Okay, now this is the first or the second of our coral trees, and as far as thinking about corals, again, I'm always rushing to try to make sure that I give you the distinguishing characteristics right off the bat and kind of press on those. So this is from Mexico, Earthrhina coralloides, 30 feet tall and 30 feet wide. It's considered a small scale tree. Now it's called the naked coral because it blooms usually in the early parts of the spring, January-ish, and when it blooms, there are no leaves on the tree, and so it's just showing off its blooms, which is good. This is a adapted characteristic of trees that want to make sure that their blooms are seen and visited by pollinators. So we don't want any of those pesky leaves getting in the way. Let's just throw out the blooms and make sure that they are showing up. Now, of all of the blooms of the coral trees, these are ones that bloom quite prolifically when they bloom. I would want to describe this as looking as though the flower spike, which is this whole thing right here, this flower spike or inflorescence, has been squashed from the top down, making it a very squatty inflorescence. that might mean very little to you now. But when we compare these to others that we are going to see, I think it'll probably prove to be important. So squatty bloom, it's a good way to describe it. So wider than it is tall. The inflorescence is wider than it is tall. It's been pressed down from the top. Okay, so each one of these is a separate flower. Okay, this is a flower, this is a flower, and they are all attached. That's called an inflorescence. Okay. Now, the leaves. All coral trees have 3 leaflets. Many coral trees have those leaflets shaped like a spade. When I say spade, I'm talking about like on a deck of cards spade. Okay. So how do we tell this from others? This one, to me, always looks a little dull green. Okay. And so it's not dark green and shiny. It's kind of more of a dull green. So that would be a characteristic to look for. It's not like this, we're going to be seeing another one coming along. And in fact, the Earthrhina kaffir that we've already had is a much shinier leaf. Big leaves, roundish spade-shaped leaves. Squatty in shape flowers, okay, blooming from the bottom up on the inflorescence. But also, if you flip the leaf over, there's these little hook-like spurs on the petals and on the branches as well. So we will want to look for those. In fact, you usually feel them before you see them. So pruning Earthrhina coralloides is a wild ride. Because there are spines on the branches and sometimes even on the bigger branches and even sometimes on the trunks. Now, if we were visiting this tree at UCI, this would be my other thing. This is what was my savior when I was a student. The trunks of this Earthrhina coralloides are golden, okay? They will always be golden. Now, different degrees of golden for sure, but always golden. Okay, so look for that. So that'll be your first clue. Obviously, if it's not blooming, is the golden trunk. That'll get you way down the road in identifying this tree. Okay, so this is one I think on Highland Drive in Dover Shores. But yeah, it's a very golden trunk. Very close up, looks kind of alien in a way. Here you can see a tree, and you can see underneath this kind of golden trunk here. But do you guys see how the general cast, this is kind of a blurry shot, but you see how the general cast of the tree is kind of a dull green? It's not super shiny. I'm hoping you agree with me when you look at it from a distance. Here it is in bloom with no leaves. So naked coral refers to that. And here's the inflorescence as well. Here's one in this. I think this is on the drive-by list on Broadway and Tustin. There's two trees on either side when this development was being built. In the east side of Costa Mesa, they planted these trees on opposite sides of this entrance into this street. And one guy always tops the hell out of his tree, and the other guy treats it nicely. So, so when you guys go there, if you do go there, make sure you try to figure out which guy does the topping. But you can see we're starting to get a little precursor to leaf drop for the fall. There's not really a fall color, but it's the leaves are getting ready to drop. Here's the trunk again. In the tree that I just showed you, always has kind of a golden cast to it. This is the one at UCI that we would see if you went to Aldrich Park. Lots of knobby, kind of almost like a Ficus carica. It's got a lot of knobs and bumps, and it's very contorted and a lot of character to this tree. I will tell you that this tree has is known for having just very wild branching habit, in that the branches will take off and then they'll turn a right angle and then they'll turn another sharp angle. And when you look up through the canopy of an unpruned Earthrhina coralloides, you don't know where to start. It's just a real rat's nesty kind of a thing. So getting them young is important. Going after an older one and trying to correct problems, that's going to be a tall order. But anyway, you can see all the knobs and bumps on this this particular one here. So it's deciduous tree from Mexico, grows 30 feet tall and wide. Distinctive golden bark is a characteristic that most easily identifies this species of coral. Compound 3-leaflet leaf, spade-shaped leaflets, dull green with spurs on the petiole. Squatty flower inflorescence comes prior to the tree leafing out in early spring. I've seen it leaf out in late January into February. Okay, Ficus macrophylla is the Moreton Bay fig. This is the largest tree on our tree list. And it's, you know, from Australia, 200 feet tall and 200 feet wide. Just big, big, big tree. Also, if you put it in your front yard, just forget about putting anything else there. Just don't do it. It's going to take over. It's going to grow. You see some buttress roots starting to form. You see a lot of surface roots here. This is one in Orange. It's over 100 years old. It's in front of a big church there. I had Joe run across the street for scale. But yeah, very, very, very big tree. Good to know though, because it's got some value in its stature and its, I mean, look at this tree. It's just gorgeous. And they have these in Aldridge Park, and there's 2 or 3 really big ones. So you don't put this in a lawn, right? So a few characteristics to think about. The leaves almost look like a rubber tree, Ficus elastica. They're kind of got a ovate shape, and they come to a point. They produce little fruits that start out green, about 1 inch across, and they eventually kind of turn to a dark purplish color. But also, some ficus have a sheath that surrounds the rolled bud, leaf bud. Okay, so here's the leaf bud here. Okay, and there's a papery sheath that kind of surrounds that. And as the leaf starts to unwind from being coiled up, that paper sheath drops out off and lays on the ground. So, you know, we all as students think about, well, what can I look for? You know, if I'm having a trouble with this. Of course, if you can't identify this one, you might be struggling a little bit, but also there, you'll see those papery sheaths littering the ground. So here's the leaf again, comes to a point. It's lightly fuzzy on the bottom, almost just barely detectable, but definitely there's some fuzz there, and it's kind of a rusty color. The fruit starts out green and becomes purple with little white dots. And one of my students, the first year I taught, was pointing out this vein structure here, where the lateral veins tie themselves together through a network inside the outer edge of the leaf, which I thought was a good observation. Okay, from Queensland, Australia, large tree can reach 200 feet tall and as wide. Known for its buttress roots, this tree is one of the known strangler fig species. Leaves 8 to 10 inches, rubbery, dark green on top with a bronze fuzz on the bottom side. Look for papery rolled leaf sheaths littering the ground. It's an evergreen tree, so there's always a new leaf unrolling somewhere on the tree, and so this is something you see regularly. Fruit 1 inch green to purple with white speckles. Park or large area tree, but not for the home. Okay, Ficus rubiginosa. This is the rusty leaf fig. So when I started landscaping, I think I might have shared with you that I took my clients to tree nurseries all the time, and we picked out trees together. And a lot of times I would notice, and then a lot of times my clients would notice, what's that beautifully shaped tree there? The roundish head, whitish, almost whitish bark. It looks like it's been, kind of rounded over. It was always these Ficus rubiginosa. They have a nice shape to them. Okay. But they also have these little fruits, and these fruits litter the driveways probably a good 3 months out of the year. And if you happen to have one of these littering your driveway or your front walkway, you will pay attention and you will resent the tree just a little bit because of this. I had a client that would pay me to prune the trees when it was fruiting to try to reduce the fruit that was tracked into the house. So it was very timing, and she was always watching. So when it's time, she had me come and do that. And I said, well, you might think about, if these are a really problem, maybe, remove one, but she explained to me that no, she lived in East Bluff, and there's houses are on terraces, and so they had a pool, and so the people on the terrace above could look into her pool, and these trees kept anybody from doing that. So that was more important than the fruit litter. So anyway, this one does have some pretty serious fuzz on the underside. In fact, there's one called Ficus rubiginosa pubescens, which has lots and lots of fuzz. But this is what we would see on the underside. So the rusty leaf fig, this is the namesake here. Here are the leaves. They're kind of cupped upwards. You can see that rolled up at the edges. This is one on OCC's campus. You can see that white trunk and rounded head. Tree's never been touched. And here's the bark with the leaf and the sausage thumb there. So native to Australia, grows 20 to 50 feet tall and 30 to 50 feet wide. Single or multi-stem tree with smooth, light gray to whitish bark. Leaves oval. They don't have the same point, and they're not as big as the Moreton Bay fig. And they have much more prolific rust on the underside. Small, abundant, half-inch fruits can be a problem around sidewalks, driveways, and pools. Known for good natural form and structure and dense canopy. Okay. I think I'll tell you the story now because you're going to get it eventually. There is one tree on our list for purely selfish reasons, and it's this one here. Eucalyptus erythrocories is a very interesting looking eucalyptus. And it has this red cap that goes over the capsule. When the cap pops off, it has these bright shaving brush sized blossoms, bright sulfur yellow. So right off the bat, it has, these attributes that are pretty stunning. The problem is, and the reason we don't see more of these trees is they tend to be a little top heavy. And it means that a lot of them will lay down in their first year or two if they get subjected to a Santa Ana wind or some kind of an event. They're not staked, they'll roll over, and then people don't know what to do with them after that. So that's why we don't see more. They're really actually a very cool tree if they're just babied a little bit in their first few years. So here are the flowers. They also have the largest capsule of any of the eucalyptus that you'll be seeing. I don't know if I have pictures here of the capsule. Yeah, there it is. So you can see the capsule, really big bell-shaped capsule, and then this bright, almost iridescent red cap that goes over that capsule when it's getting ready to flower. So bright red, yellow, sulfur yellow, and then the leaves are kind of a bluish green, very attractive plant. So here they are looking up at them. You can see reddish stems, big old capsules tucked up in there, and then you see the bright yellow and the red caps. Pretty easy to identify this tree. Now, here you can see one out in somebody's front yard. So the reason that I have this tree, bear with me. The reason I have this tree on our list is when I was a teenager, I got a Mexican double yellow-headed parrot. His name was Montague. We called him Monty. And he was a character. He was had a pretty big vocabulary. And he was my buddy for quite a few years. I moved out of the house, took Monty with me, and I moved into a house that was a detached house behind another house. It had its own alley entrance and a garage and a driveway, and it was palatial, but it didn't have any heat. And Monty used to be fun to watch when he played because I would stack avocado crates up and put his cage up about at eye level. And then I would hang a bell from the ceiling that would be just above, right around where his head would be, if he was on top of his cage, which he was most of the time. But he would start playing with this bell, he would bang at it, and then it would swing out, and then it would come back and hit him in the head, and then he'd get mad. And then there was this whole thing that happened where he would get upset, mad at this bell, and then he'd be swinging on the bell, getting really loud. And if there's somebody else in the house, it was just like all over when he started playing with his bell. It was just like he didn't even want to be around. And he loved men, but he seemed to be a little bit resistant to women. My mom experienced this with him. He would get down off his avocado crates and chase the cats all around the house, just marching across the carpet. They just didn't know what to think of him. Lots and lots of stories I could tell you about Monty. He got out for a while, flew away. I hadn't clipped his wings in a while. He got out and flew away. It took me almost 2 weeks to get him back. I would go visit him every day while he's up in the trees, try to talk him down. He would say, "Hello, Rick. Hello, Rick." I'd say, "Monty, come on down here. Come on." We'd go through this whole rigmarole, but he was so excited to be out in the world. Finally, he came back to me. One day, I'd cover him up at night, but it got cold because I didn't have any heat in this house, and he got sick, and he died way too young, and I was completely crushed. And so I remember at the time my dad lived in Vista, and he had quite a bit of land, and he said, why don't you go out and find, you're in horticulture now, why don't you go out and find a tree that would work with Monty, that would make you think of Monty. And so I did, and this was the tree I found, and we planted it, and it stayed there. In fact, after my dad left and moved to another place, I would go back to see if the tree was still there. So he was a good pet and a great friend, and so you guys have to have him on your trees list. There it is. Okay, so this is at the YMCA off of Irvine Boulevard and University Drive. There's a little cul-de-sac there. It overhangs. They topped the trees down to waist high about, 4 years ago for some weird reason, but if they're starting to come back now. But anyway, Eucalyptus erythrocories, red-capped gum, Australian native and small-scaled for eucalyptus tree, 12 to 30 feet tall and 9 to 25 feet wide. So a small tree for sure. white trunk and thick, shiny, deep green lance-shaped leaves to 7 inches long. Distinctive bright red caps pop off to reveal bright staminate shaving brush-like yellow flowers. Needs staking and pruning to shape during early years, known to lay down in big winds when young. So if you can get this into a client's yard, you might have to leave the double stakes on a little longer than a year. You prune it a couple of times while it's young, give it some good shape. It's going to be fine. So anyway, this isn't Monty, but this is it looks just like him. So this is what he looked like. So that's Monty's tree. And listen, if you have a struggle with this on the test and you write Monty's tree, I'm going to be so happy that you say that. I'm probably going to give you full credit. So just know that. All right, moving on. Eucalyptus erythrocories. We just had that. Now it's Eucalyptus grandis. So running gum. It's got a couple of names, but running gum is probably the most common. Distinctive characteristics right off the bat: bright white trunk, straight grower. It doesn't start branching usually till it's quite tall. So distinctive white trunk. It reminds me of Eucalyptus citriodora, only it's much less prone to do that kind of the wild shape up at the top. It's much more refined and much straighter trunk. Okay, so here are the leaves next to the trunk. So you can see, and this is actually at Aldrich Park. There's a bunch of them there. So a pretty neat tree, but quite large. I think it gets 150 to 200 feet tall. So it's going to be pretty big. And so you can see, the white trunks are what you'll notice first. Extremely smooth, but instead of being that flesh tone color, it's more white, pearly white. White flowers, kind of a fat leaf, although I've seen it with eucalyptus. It's always really hard because look, here's a typical leaf. Here's a leaf that I pressed on the ground. And you can see that this is much different shape than this. So this would probably be one, just to be fair and to be honest, that you would be quizzed on based on photos of the whole tree. Because if I were to just give you a leaf, maybe a rogue flower, I think it would be cruel. Because eucalyptus have so many deviations from their normal shape in the leaves, and you don't have access to this thing. So so I would just say, don't worry about it. It's going to come up, but it'll probably be pictures, and recognizing that straight white trunk would be the key. UCLA has one that's 178 feet tall and 70 feet wide. Dominant tree in wet forests and along the edges of rainforest, needs regular water. So it's planted in lawns. I sent away on what was it, eBay for seeds for this thing, and I got a package from India with these seeds for some reason. And anyway, I got 300 seeds. I think it cost me like $5. And we grew them in the prop house. Only had about 12 of them come up out of 300, and then we planted them. So they're planted in front of the art center. We've got like 6 of them planted there. They're going to get 150 feet tall. Hopefully, I live to see that. So leaves are land-shaped, 4 to 6 inches long. Good scale for tall buildings. Used for windbreaks and telephone poles in Australia. Okay, Metrosideros excelsa. This is the New Zealand Christmas tree from New Zealand. Small scale tree, 30 feet tall, 30 feet wide. It's from the Southern Hemisphere, from New Zealand. And their spring is into summer is right around Christmas time for us. Of course, they're celebrating Christmas too, but it's warm. You get the idea. So this thing's going off at Christmas time. And And it's got these really pretty red staminate flowers. This one's in a little bit too small of a planter, though. I took this picture in Brentwood, walking around the houses. I think it's outgrown its space. Here are, this is, I think at UCI, and this is about as big as you'll see these trees get. Usually a multi-trunk tree, more often than not. Another characteristic that this tree has is got dark on the top of the leaves and almost a white felt on the undersides. It gives the whole tree kind of a gray-green cast. It also has aerial roots that descend from the branches, which is kind of strange. This is great for near the coast. This can handle second exposure, seacoast. It's great near the coast. That's why it's on our list. It needs a little help. Can be kind of a scrubby, very dense tree. So it needs to be pruned a little bit. Here's the leaf. You can almost see one of the bottom parts of the leaf. There's the undersides. Here's the top, dark green, kind of a felty white on the underside. Here's the staminate flowers, and these are the old flowers that are kind of persisting. This is just a picture that I didn't take this picture, but you can see that it's right on the coast, and that was the point. Is that it's used to the marine environment and lots of salt spray. Here's one at school. Here's the staminate flowers. They're very pretty. It makes sense that it would be associated with Christmas with the red color. You can see some of the aerial roots coming down. And then this is a picture in its native habitat in New Zealand. It's real pretty. So these aerial roots, you see them a lot, even in areas that are not so close to the coast. Okay. Native to New Zealand, grows 30 feet tall and 30 feet wide. Prune off lower branches when young to establish a tree form. Leaves dark green above, white and woolly beneath. Younger growth and overall grayish green. Staminates scarlet red flowers around Christmas time and intermittently throughout the year. In Southern California, reddish aerial roots are common on this tree. Okay. Next, Lophostamen confertus, Brisbane box. Now, this tree can get up to, it says 30 to 50 feet tall, but I don't think I've ever seen one that tall. Maybe 30 feet tall, 40 feet max. But what I do want you to see when I show you these two pictures, that it's much taller than it is wide. That's the point here. And 30 to 50 feet tall, 10 to 30 feet wide. This, when you look at it, will look very much, as in the Myrtaceae family, look very much like a eucalyptus. It has kind of similar shaped leaves, although much wider. It has kind of bell-shaped capsules that look like eucalyptus. The application for this tree, you'll see it happening if you get into newer developments, or not even newer developments within the last 20 to 30 years. This is this classic thing where they take a house, put it on the lot, have a 5-foot easement between the house and the fence. Then the neighbors have a 2-story house, 5 foot on their side, meaning that the two walls of the two neighbors are 10 feet apart. And you're a landscaper, and you're brought in to say, we need to, my bedroom window looks across at their upstairs bathroom window. We don't like that. So this tree kind of found its way into this, filling this role as the tree that will handle that environment, because it's much taller than it is narrow. It gives you at least the illusion of privacy, so people don't see you marching around in your underwear upstairs. It gives you that illusion, that you're not being seen. And that's what people are really going for, just to have a sense of privacy. So good for that. Here are the leaves. Again, looks like eucalyptus. Here are the little capsules that look like eucalyptus, but it's a much wider leaf. Almost looks like an avocado in a way. Reddish stems. Here's the, here's the capsules. And when you look at the capsule, it looks like it has a little triangle in the middle. So here it is as a street tree, kind of columnar form tree. The bark is pretty interesting. Sometimes it's kind of rough, sometimes it's quite smooth, sometimes it's half and half. But it's usually an attractive looking bark. Very interesting looking flowers, kind of a wide open star with little, I guess these would be anthers along here. This would be the pistil here. So the male part of the flowers spread out in like a star pattern. So just kind of a schematic or a diagram of the leaf and the capsules, and then the very strange looking flower. From Australia, 30 to 50 feet tall, 10 to 30 feet wide, generally smaller. Eucalyptus-like in characteristics with slightly wider than eucalyptus and leathery leaves, 6 to 8 inches long. White showy flowers followed by reddish brown capsules. Attractive bark often peels to smooth. Okay. Pittosporum viridiflorum, which means it has different flowers. You know, this is a pittosporum, and the thing that I'd want you to know about pittosporum is that all the leaves are the same. They're spatulate, which means they're thinner towards the stem than they are out at the end. You know, like a spatula has a narrow handle and a fat area out at the end, flipping the burgers or whatever you're flipping. So, so it has a typical pittosporum leaf on it, spatulate in shape. Also, most pittosporums have a prominent central vein that is very visible from a distance. Also, many pittosporums have an aromatic flower or scent to them. So here's your spatulate leaf, top and bottom. Here's the top, here's the bottom. You can see that pronounced central vein, narrow as it gets towards the stem. This is one on Magnolia Street in Costa Mesa. I was just there today, walking up this driveway, hoping I didn't get shot as I took a specimen for you guys. But it's a pretty tree, kind of dense foliage, and you know, some people just aren't attracted to this particular look, but I think it's a good tree. I like it because it's not too big, 6 to 10 feet tall and 6 to 10 feet wide. Small scale tree for sure. So you can see the bark looks kind of a light gray to white and crackly. I would describe it as crackly. And here you can see the foliage up inside. This is one in UCI that's been there for a long time, and you can see that pittosporum leaf with that lighter vein here. Here you can see the leaves kind of have a little bit of a twisting on the edges. Sometimes it has to do with watering, but something to look for. Definitely a dense foliage tree. There's flowers which have a kind of a mock orangey orange blossom smell, yield little fruits that look like chickpeas. Here's another one that's probably at maximum size. Okay, South African native, small scale, 10 to 20 feet tall, 6 to 10 feet wide. Fragrant flowers followed by greenish round capsules, spatulate leaves to 6 inches. Smooth to crackly whitish bark. Tree attracts wildlife. Things like to hang out in this tree. Areobatria deflexa is the bronze loquat. Distinctive characteristic right away. The new growth is showy and reddish. And so this bronze loquat is kind of pointing to that. There are flowers and there sometimes can be fruit, but the fruit drops off pretty quickly. And sometimes you'll never see a fruit on one of these things. Look at these long leaves that are very coarsely toothed on the edges. Here we have a bronze new leaf close up showing the coarsely toothed edge. So there are a few of these. These are often grown as standards or as multi-trunks, probably more as multi-trunks than standards. So this is there's a few multi-trunks around the snack shack at OCC. I don't know, some of you might remember that back when we used to go to school. Anyway, there's the coarse tooth and there's the bronze or the bronzy reddish new growth. There's the snack shack right there. And here you can see a multi-trunk tree. Here's the little fruits that quickly fall off. Birds go after them though. Not edible per se for us. Here's the bark and the leaf. So it's a Chinese native, 15 to 30 feet tall and 15 to 30 feet wide, shrubby and grown as a multi-trunk tree, as well as a standard tree, also grown as an espalier. And so you might find this in a nursery trained against a lattice in two-dimensional form. So you could put it against like a south-facing wall, or you know, it can handle that. The growth can handle that. Characteristic bright red to bronze new growth that persists in color, slowly turning green with age. It's his best and most recognizable feature. Long leaves, 12 inches by 3 inches wide, coarsely toothed. Fruit not edible and often unnoticed. And then finally, just because, not because it's a really good tree for our area, this is Salix babylonica. This is the weeping willow. And I took this in Washington, D.C., obviously. But they're often planted along the edges of ponds because of their reflective characteristic and their weeping shape. This is one I took at St. James Park in London, and they had them along the edges there as well. So trying to get that kind of reflective look along the water's edge. Plus they love water. They are classic for getting into sewer drains and leach lines and stuff in people's homes. So be careful for that. They also get pretty big. So this is one that's, I don't know if it's still there. This is on Camellia and Orange Avenue. What I would want you to know about this, because I don't think I have a live specimen for you. What I'd want you to know about this is that when you're talking about weeping, we've showed you a lot of trees that have, we say it has a weeping characteristic. And that could be the leaves that hang down, but the branches that don't. But this thing, it weeps. I mean, it just, the branches come out and just go straight down. And then the leaves are along this branch that's going straight down. And so there's no denying the weeping characteristic of a weeping willow. They suffer in Southern California. They get rust disease. They're deciduous. So there's a period of time where they don't look so good. Here's a close-up of the leaf. It's narrow. You can tell, I can tell just by looking at this leaf that it's been chewed on all summer long. You see the kind of the mottling where little things like spider mites have taken the juice out of the cells of the plant. And so it looks a little bit, this is a good thing to identify this tree if ever you see it, because it's going to always look a little beat up if you see it in the summertime or in the fall. And then if you flip it over on the backside of the leaves, sometimes you see little pustules, orange pustules of rust. That's a fungus. But here it is, serrated edges, narrow leaves, kind of a yellowish stem hanging down. Here again, on the serration on the leaves. Stippling insect damage causing discoloration. Backside of the leaf. So it's a beautiful tree. You know, it's good for privacy, right? So you could have a whole thing going on behind this tree and nobody would really know that you were, you know, having outdoor furniture and stuff. You could still feel a little bit private. Okay. Excuse me. This one's from China. 30 to 50 feet tall and as wide or even wider. It's on the trees list because it's iconic. More universally iconic in the US than useful in Southern California, requiring regular water and known to have an invasive root seeking water. Better in more open areas far from buildings. Weeping characteristic is the attractive feature, especially near water, creating beautiful reflections. So at the Huntington, we're going to see a beautiful example of this at the Huntington Library in the Japanese garden. So I think that might be it. Damn it. Where is it? Okay, you guys, welcome back. We're gonna look at some of these specimens here. Starting with number 77, Agathis robusta, the Queensland cori. So remember, I described this as being, I don't know, plastic, very, it has characteristics that feel different than most trees. It's, even when we think about ficus and certain trees that have a very elastic look to them or feel to them. This one has almost a plastic feel to it. Parallel veins, here's the underside and the top of the leaf. So you can kind of compare the two. Remember, this has a round, about 3-inch cone, oval to round, and the center, the seeds kind of unfurl around that central spike inside the cone. Tall, narrow tree. Any questions about Agathis robusta? Okay. Okay, Araucaria heterophylla is the Norfolk Island pine, sometimes called the star pine. This one, if you're kind of rubbing it this way with the points of the little scales on the leaf, it's very soft. And again, kind of almost plasticky again. So remember, when we think about these trees, you'll notice them being either excurrent or having a bit of a lean to them. But this shape of this leaf should be pretty distinctive. We don't have anything that's really close to this one. So just look for the new growth being a lighter green, the mature growth being a darker green, and them all being kind of shiny. This one can handle being moved indoors, can grow indoors in pots, be kept small in pots. So we had one when I was growing up that was in a pot for, I don't know, 10 years at least, and just kind of stayed the same way. My dad took it to work to put it in his office, stayed in his office for years. So yeah, they're pretty forgiving. Okay, so Pinus pinea from Southern Europe. This is the Italian stone pine. The needles on this are probably about 4.5 inches long, 4 to 5 inches. What's going on? Okay. You want me to try to lock it? Okay. Needles in twos. Look for the dog tail look on this when it's younger, and then the broad dome when the tree gets older. When you look at the bark, you're going to look for platy bark. Okay, dark green needles. So the other pine that we have that has needles in twos is the Pinus halepensis, the Aleppo pine. That has more of a golden green cast and a much thinner needle, softer, thinner needle. Okay. Hydranthus impetaginosus, pink trumpet, excuse me, pink trumpet tree, tropical America. Remember, these leaves are palmately compound. 5 to 7 leaflets. So we're seeing 5 in these leaves that were detaching from the stem. Now, the ones that we have on campus are young. They were just planted within the last year. So it'll take probably 5 to 6 or 7 years for them to bloom. And so we went and gathered specimens from young trees, knowing we weren't going to find any blooms for you. But you saw lots of pictures of the blooms from Disneyland. So here we go. We're starting to see this tree planted a lot more. It gets pretty big, and I'm always, I always want to make sure you know that sometimes if you were to plant something like this in San Bernardino or someplace where we get frost, or Riverside, places that get winter frost, that this would be not a good tree for that. Anything that's tropical like this would not be a good tree. So just always keep that in mind, that we create a trees list that is conducive to our area within 20 miles, and that's kind of what we're thinking. Okay. Any questions about this one?
Is it okay to still use Tababuya if you think it's just more fun to say?
It is a lot more fun to say, isn't it? Anything that's in parentheses, which would be considered a synonym, means that it's been around or used enough so that it would be valid. So yeah, if it's Tababuya, is more fun to say. There's no doubt. And it would work. Okay. Cerasus occidentalis is the western redbud, 10 to 18 feet tall and wide. Usually grows as a big shrub, multi-trunk shrub, up to tree size. And remember that they sometimes will make these into a standard. The pictures I showed you, a couple of them were standards, trained as standards when we bought them, or the campus. Round leaf, notch sometimes at the tip. These don't really have much of a notch going on though. And like I said, that's not always consistent. I've even seen it like a little bump at the tip, but we look for those notches. It's almost perfectly round. We happen to have a couple of little blossoms that I've pulled a couple off. So the blossoms are much more prolific on this than the eastern redbud, because they don't rely so much on the frost. So we're gonna always see blossoms, and we're always gonna see pods. I don't think I have any pods in here. Hang on. Oh, look, there's pods. So they're not the prettiest pods, but pods aren't designed to be pretty. And they kind of have a little bit of a dark brown to almost blackish tone to them. And so, yeah, I still think about the client that wanted me to peel them all off. The things we do. Okay. Any questions about the Western redbud?
How do you say the Latin name again?
The Latin name is Cercis occidentalis. Cercis occidentalis.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do the seeds come off easily by hand, or do you have to prune them off?
Oh, you can pop them off. You know, you can't be too rough with them or you end up making little tear wounds. But they'll hang on for quite some time. So yeah, I popped them off.
Okay.
Katie, have you had any experience with that? I know you're around this in the native world.
Well, at Tree of Life, we're not very good at pruning things, so we just let their freak flags fly.
Yep.
Everything grows in its natural form. But yeah, what you said earlier about the watering and getting them established is exactly on point. But also just in Southern California, not at elevation, they need a lot more water than some other native trees that are more Orange County native, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good to know. Okay. You know, there's a little bit of zigzagging going on that stem. You guys see that? But it's not as pronounced as it is on the Eastern redbud. Okay, we're going to bypass. Oh, we're going to go. Okay. Okay, I'm going to pull one leaf off. That's not the leaf I wanted. Okay, so what we have here is Erythrina coralloides, the naked coral tree from Mexico. And we're just showing you the leaves, and it's not time for flowers. And so we want to reassert the fact that these leaves are in fact a dull green, not shiny really to speak of. They look like there's some stippling damage, which is usually the case with a leaf that's been on the tree for the whole season and is getting ready to fall. Stippling is where little insects like spider mites will put their mouth part in and suck out the contents of a single cell. And so that creates that mottling, that lighter speckling. But it's a dull green for sure. Spade-shaped, large leaf. So I don't know where my little ruler went. Oh, here it is underneath. So one of these leaflets is about 6.5, almost 7 inches long by 6.5, almost 7 inches wide. So the end one is usually the biggest of the leaflets. Now, if we were to flip this guy over, hopefully you guys see the spurs on the sides there. Here, there's one right here. And there are a few here. So they're pretty nasty. Something to be aware of if you have this tree, that you're going to wear gloves and long sleeve shirt, maybe even a jacket if you're pruning this thing. Again, flowers when the leaves have fallen off, it's briefly deciduous, squatty flower inflorescence. Okay. Any questions about this one? I don't know if I mentioned this before, but there's a guy that is contemporary of Joe Steads, who's the succulent expert, and always said that the fact that these trees are good at getting water, can live through long periods of dryness between waterings, makes them a good candidate for planting amongst or in a succulent garden, a cactus and succulent garden as a tree. And his name is Michael Buckner, and he has these incredible slides and PowerPoints of landscapes that he's done. That's his thing, is cactus and succulent. But anyway, he says that, you know, a tree like this is a perfect candidate, a small scale tree for, now I've never done that, but it's just something to bring up. Okay. We're going to bypass Serotonia siliqua and we're going to go to Ficus macrophylla. Goodness sakes. Okay, so this tree we think is a hybrid, and I asked Joe to go ahead and take samples, but these leaves are smaller than we would typically see on your average Ficus macrophylla. We think that this is a hybrid that's between Ficus rubiginosa and macrophylla. So I'm saying that, and I don't want to give you any disinformation, but the similarities are the shape of the leaf that comes to a point and the light fuzziness on the underside. So I'm just going to show you this one. I'm trying to see if there's any of these papery sheath. It looks like these are all pretty dry, these buds. So nothing there. So I'm going to just leave those there. And then I'm going to bring Ficus rubiginosa, a rounder leaf. Smaller leaf for sure. Okay. So these are similar in shape, but this is not a true Ficus macrophylla. And so I don't want to confuse anybody, but it does have a shape that's consistent. These are more consistent with Ficus rubiginosa, and I wanted to just show you that. I think this is actually Ficus rubiginosa pubescens here, and this is Ficus rubiginosa here. Let me see if I can find any more representative. I don't know if Joe gathered these up of two separate trees or what, because they're two different sizes. But these are all Ficus rubiginosa, and here's some of the fruits. Okay. So anyway, apologies, because this is what I really wanted you to see. This is kind of a stab at it, but now that I get them next to each other, this leaf would be another 3 inches longer, but have the same shape and the same light fuzz on the bottom of the leaf. This is Ficus rubiginosa for sure here. Okay. But you can see the fruits that can be problematic. They both have fruits. This one would be 1 inch across. They're about a 1/2 inch across. Okay. Let's move on to this one here. Okay, so this is obviously Eucalyptus erythrocoris. You can see the capsules when they're young have a bright red cap on the top. When they get a little bit larger and actually open, they open to these kind of, I call them shaving brush looking, very large yellow, sulfur yellow staminate flowers around the periphery. Okay. And then it gives us a nice big capsule, the biggest capsule you're going to see in this group of trees anyways. And then I always thought of these leaves as being red stems, of course, but of having a kind of a blue-green cast to them. You may or may not agree with me, but here's the front and the back of the leaves. So this leaf is about 8 inches long. So this is 7 to 9 inches for these leaves. Okay, so always something interesting going on with this tree. A long bloom cycle. The capsules persist for a long time. And there's a lot of times there's little red caps littering around on the ground beneath you, and it'll make you think you've, spilled something. But an interesting tree for sure. And I would like, if you guys, think about it and are thinking about spaces and putting trees in and stuff. And if you are in a position where you could care for a tree when it's younger, it's worth the effort to get this tree past its delicate phase. Also, this has like many eucalyptus, it has a kind of a bulge at the root crown that is heavily protected and is used to encountering forest fires, and will actually grow a whole new tree from that base if there's a forest fire. So there's a lot of eucalyptus that have that characteristic. This one is known to have a little kind of a bulge at the base for that. Okay. Monty's tree, Eucalyptus erythrocoris. This is Eucalyptus grandis, running gum. Remember, this gets quite tall. And this is a tree from that send away, that I got 300 seeds that came from India, and only like 10 or 12 of them germinated, and then we planted them all. So they're already blooming. So they're only probably about 3 years old, 2 to 3 years old, and they're already blooming, which is a good thing to see. But you can see the flowers on these, and you can actually see a little flower bud here, where there will soon be a little capsule on this guy. But leaves are pretty big, wide compared to your average eucalyptus shape, a little wider. But again, not always consistent, but something to notice. So this is Eucalyptus grandis, running gum. You wouldn't want to plant this in your front yard. You'd want to plant it if you're doing a commercial landscape next to some tall buildings, for sure. Okay. Metrosideros excelsa is the New Zealand Christmas tree, 30 foot by 30 foot. Young growth is kind of gray-green. I was trying to find some older leaves on this that show the contrast between younger and older growth. Hang on, let's see if I have any more of this tree. Oh, you get a sense for it here. Now, also what you're seeing are blooms that haven't yet happened. So this is a kind of a cluster of blooms that's getting ready to open. These have already opened here, and so you'll see the inflorescence or the blooms persist on the tree. And some people don't like that. They see those kind of brown spent blossoms, and they don't like that look. So it's one of those things. It's amazing the kinds of complaints you hear from people, but it's a good tree for the coast, for our area, and of course it's always going off around Christmas time. Okay, Metrosideros excelsa. Any questions about this one? Notice the top and the bottom of the leaves different. One's shiny and dark green, and one is kind of a felty, almost whitish color. Okay, here's Pittosporum viridiflorum. Pop up a couple leaves for you here. Okay. So we can look around inside here and see there were blooms in here a while ago. It's looking a little less attractive in there now. But here's the spatulate leaf, top and bottom, okay? And that very visible central vein Something to notice, most pittosporums have that. Most pittosporums have a spatulate leaf and a pronounced light central vein. Okay, so this is a small scale tree. Definitely stays pretty small, 20 feet tall, 6 to 10 feet wide. It's a dense growing tree, so you know it's definitely going to provide shade when you are underneath it. Did I skip one? I skipped one. We didn't see Lophostema convertus yet, did we? Went straight to Pittosporum viridiflorum. You guys gotta keep me on the right track here. This must mean you're sleeping.
I just didn't want to interrupt what you were talking about.
Well, that's very nice of you. I appreciate that. Okay, let's go back and see if we can get a. Go back. Okay, Lophostamon convertus, Brisbane box. So typical eucalyptus leaves, but a little bit wider, bolder, and sometimes they can get a little bit longer than this, but front and back of the leaf. And then when you look at the capsules, look for the triangle in there. You guys see it? Okay. This is a young one. All right. Well, anyway, obviously this one is a narrower tree than it is wide. So we would think about this as being a good one for dividing the spaces between tall two-story McMansions. You know, we see so much of that. So a good one for that. A pretty problem-free tree and a naturally open branching habit. So that's, you know, what I mean is that, you know, it's not one that's going to look like it needs to be opened up or thinned out or anything like that. Okay. Any questions about this one? Okay, so Areobatria deflexa from China, the bronze loquat. You know, its most distinctive characteristic isn't being shown off here. And what would be that distinctive characteristic that we're not really seeing here?
Bronze new growth.
Bronze new growth. So this happens to be, you know, maybe that time of year towards the end of the year where the leaves are finally starting to go from that bronzy color to fading to a green. So you can find that bronze new growth on the tree most of the time. And maybe if you went to different places, you would see it, but the ones that we obviously were looking at today didn't have it, but keep that in mind. This is definitely a loquat leaf. We're going to have two loquats in this class. One is the fruiting loquat, Areobatria japonica. This is Areobatria deflexa. This is an ornamental tree. It does make these little fruits here, but they quickly will fall off and not usually be something that you would be seeking out. The other loquat would be one that we would be looking for the fruit. Okay. So very coarsely toothed leaf, very coarsely toothed. Grown as a tropical. This is one that would go really well around pools, because if you're a pool man and your biggest scourge is probably trees dropping into the pool, and so you want big leaves that you could scoop out with your net. You don't want the little leaves that are going to get caught up in the filter. Okay, so this is a good one. Has a tropical look anyway. This one can be grown as an espalier, as well as a multi-trunk and a standard. Okay, questions about this? Okay. Okay, so I don't have Salix babylonica, but I do have something that I forgot to put up before. These go with this tree. Can anybody tell me what this tree is?
Androanthus impedigenius.
Yes. Androanthus impedigenosus. And you know, it's not easy to sound those out when you know that everybody's hearing you. So good for you for your bravery. Tababuia impedigenosa becomes Androanthus impedigenosus. So both of those names would be legit. But what I was putting up there and why I made a big deal about all of this was that along with the Fabaceae family, the Bignoniaceae family can have some pretty significant pods on them. And so that's what we're seeing here. So these are probably about 18 inches long, and they're hanging on here from last year. So they've already opened up and pushed out their seeds. Okay. Oh, look at this. There's a few seeds in here. So here's some seeds. Obviously designed to flutter to the ground, spin around, and get that seed dispersed away from the parent plant. Okay. So Hydranthus impedigenosus, pink trumpet tree. All right. Now, here's how things are going to go from here. We're trying to make sure that the Huntington Library is going to be ready for us to come at the end of class to see those trees. We're going to be meeting in Claremont in November. So it's December. What is it? November 20th? Is that what it was? You guys remember? Yeah, the 20th, right? And then December 4th. You guys remember?
Yes, that's what I have written down.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so we're going to have a quiz next week on these particular trees. The only thing that's going to change between now and the regime that we've had going on before is that after the midterm, there will most likely be a ringer. What's that? What's a ringer? Let me clarify. A ringer is a plant from a past list, but we don't know which list. But it's one that you should already know. Okay. So it's not meant to stir the pot or make your life miserable. It's just meant to keep you sharp. And so remember, one of the 10 will be one of the 20. Is it 10 or 20? It's 20. Yeah, one of them is going to be a ringer. Okay, so that'll be different. Also, when Rachel made the request, I'm going to post the key for the midterm. Okay, so if you want to go back and see that, and then it'll be there for you to look at. And then what else was I going to tell you guys? We seem to have been plagued for the first few weeks on the world of capitalization. Seem to have given some of you guys a problem. So I've commented to all of you that have needed that commenting, and hopefully we're at the end of that period and we're moving on. But I want to make sure you all know that the genus is always capitalized, the species is always lowercase, the family is always capitalized, and so is the variety. But the variety has single quotes around it. Okay, that's how we distinguish all of that stuff. So remember that. Don't forget it. It's a half a point each time you mess up. So that can get pricey. Any questions for me?